Good afternoon, Valerie Ling here. I am a clinical psychologist and also someone who comes and talks quite a bit about what it means to expand our energy, conserve our energy, not burn out, figure out what this loneliness exhaustion quotient is that's going on in society these days. Coming to you today to talk about what it means to actually deal with those thoughts of if only things would stay the same, or it worked yesterday, let's just hope it works today. Do you ever have these sorts of thoughts where you look and you think, I fixed it, I solved it, now if everything just stays the same, I'll be okay, I can figure out what to do? How often does that happen for you? I'm not sure about you, but it very rarely happens to me that way. And I used to call this, or still call this sort of thinking, linear thinking. Linear thinking because we want to get our ducks in a row, and then only when our ducks are in a row that we then decide that, okay, I'm okay, or things are going to be okay, or things are going to work. The reason why I think linear thinking rarely works is for a few reasons. Number one, people rarely stay the same. I am learning this while on sabbatical. I had this idea that while I was going to do some study, the people around me, family, work, I guess the advocacy space of burnout would just stay the same. And then therefore I would just, kind of go through it, and everything that I had put into place by way of making sure that, housework gets done and kids are all right and whatever goes on at work is all right, would just stay that way. It didn't happen that way at all, because people, they don't stay the same. Number two, the reason why people don't stay the same, other than it is perfectly natural and normal, people can grow, they learn, they adapt, but also hard times come upon us, right? And then we've got to shift and change as well. And another reason why people don't stay the same is because very rarely these days do we have an environment that is fairly static for long periods of time. Head over to the page Center for Effective Serving, like and follow that, because I very often will hop off, as I will do after this, to actually share a little bit broader about my findings and study and learning in the leadership and serving space. What I have gathered, though, is that in terms of the way that society works, very often with our friends, for example, we have these conversations that Sydney 20 years ago, you couldn't find a shop open on, after 5 o'clock, very rarely on Saturday, and definitely not on Sunday. And you just will, you wouldn't even think about it, right? You'd make sure that you get the shopping done. You make sure that you have enough petrol in your tank. And, if you were a student, you just make sure that you got all the materials that you needed, because there was no online shopping, there was no internet banking. You literally had to go to the bank if you needed to withdraw money. There were ATM machines and all of that, but it was, and everybody just beat to the rhythm of that drum. Everybody had the same pace. There were no expectations that you would be able to have a spontaneous meal whipped up because you could get to the shops at 10 o'clock at night. There was no expectation that you would be able to make a purchase, because everybody knew that you'd have to wait for the bank and the offices to open and the shops, etc., etc., etc. And everybody just had that sort of rhythm and that pace. It was slower. It was far more intentional. It was less immediate, and it actually required a lot more executive functioning and planning, which means that I need to think ahead. I need to look at the time that is required. I need to actually, chunk steps down a little bit more. Today, that is no longer the case. We are using working memory a lot more. In fact, we've outsourced our working memory to phones. And do you know your own phone number? Do you know your loved one's phone numbers? How many phone numbers do you know? I suspect it's probably decreasing, and so we're actually using working memory less and less for what it's probably meant to be, and really just bouncing from one situation to another. And so therefore, people aren't going to stay the same, because the situations that we're required to respond to are changing far more rapidly, far more increasingly. Today, for example, was a day meant to be of study. I'm meant to be sitting here in my study. In fact, I can show you. Let's do it behind the scenes here. Oh, you see that? That is my study right there by the window, meant to be doing that. And I cannot get away with my study without actually having a laptop open, because all my study is online. The library is online, my tutor is online, my class is online, my notes are online. And as a result, I get all these notifications that come through with messages and emails, and my phone is connected to my laptop, right? So there are these intrusions. Now, I could choose to ignore them. Not that disciplined to ignore that. And so you straddle these 5 different decision spaces, making small decisions but very frequently. So we're not going to be able to stay the same, because in order to adapt to the environments that we live in means that we have to change. How do human beings change? Well, before we change behaviors, a lot of it stays up here. We have to work it out, right? And so we're in this state of reactive thinking and reactive deciding. The levels of decisions that we are making can be different. From what I did today between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. will be different again tomorrow between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. I don't know about you, but that's kind of exhausting. And so what happens is, if we go with that frame of reference, which says, I just have to fix the formula or get it right today, and then tomorrow, next week, next month will be fine. If we go with that, we may not be able to actually feel that things are working. We might always feel that things are not working. I've been really impressed by a book that I read not so long ago about how to raise entrepreneurial kids by Daniel Priestley. Not so much because I think everybody should raise entrepreneurial children, but because his book basically references a thing called the adaptability quotient, right? How do you actually encourage children to be adaptable, to read their environment, to ask a set of questions that are exploratory, to generate options, and to be adaptive to the situation. That seems to be more and more what is required of us. This spills over to what I'm going to share in the page, Center for Effective Serving, if you want to hop on and listen into that, about what I'm discovering about work environments and leadership that is required, and why across all industries, IT, nursing, teaching, medicine, all industries, journalism, we are burning out. So hop on there and I will share about that. So I just want to finish with a reflection that occurred to me this morning when I was having my breakfast. And though I have a daily practice of doing my devotions as a Christian, reading my Bible and praying, that really hasn't been enough reflective space for me. And I was struggling because it's almost like at night, my brain wanted to continue to do this kind of processing, and these raw things would be floating through my brain. And then I'd wake up in the morning almost as if I just watched a horrible movie, not necessarily a horror movie, but some kind of cliffhanger, awful real and wake up in the morning with that. And it's like, I think my brain was saying, you didn't actually get to process the stuff of the day. So we're just going to keep it live for you in that night. Then you're going to wake up with the spillover effect. And I was thinking and thinking, what has actually happened? What's happened? Though I've got my devotions going and I'm spending time, what has been different? And what I've realized is because I have been challenging myself to extend my social networks, to be more diverse in my social contacts and to not be insular in my thinking, I've been spending quite a lot of my days off, as well as times when I'm exercising or times when I have to myself in the wonderful company of others, which I really, really enjoy. That comes though at the expense of not actually having time to yourself to just reflect. How easy it is for reflection to become a checkbox and not actually serve the function that it needs to serve, which is to have quiet and space and to say, what am I aware of? What have I been dealing with? What are the thoughts that have been circulating? Oh, how's that making me feel? Oh, hadn't realized that was there. Just thought that I was feeling sad. Just thought I was feeling angry. Gosh, I think I'm feeling guilty. I think I'm disappointed. Oh, I think I'm uncertain. Right? Those things. And then going, what of that can I control? What of that is reasonable? What of that I'd really love to put some steps together so that I can move through that? What of that do I need to accept? Making peace with all of that, making a plan with all of that, seeing options, seeing connections, seeing meaning, and then coming back and saying, oh, we've done that work. We've done that internal work. So when we have this narrow bandwidth, we're reactive, things are in largely working memory, we're moving from one space to another, and we hold on to the expectation that the things that we put into place today will work tomorrow. We really put ourselves back into a box with very, very little oxygen. I hope you get a chance to step out of that box and think about what I've shared with you today, and to ask yourself, and probably even do a personal audit and say, what's cutting off the oxygen for you? How much of those expectations that you're holding on to and hustling towards and just rehearsing, just trying to do the same thing, how much of that is actually really working for you? And how much of it is letting go, embracing, accepting, finding some space to yourself to say, well, of course it's not going to work every day the same way because there's a human being involved, or we live in a really changeable environment, or we're experimenting with some things, or the stress hasn't resolved, right? So from a day to day, the way that we're trying to address that stress is different. We're trying a couple of things. We haven't quite got it down yet how much of that exists. You probably need to take some time to reflect and find some expansive space to do that. Take care.